There comes a moment in your life when you must look in the mirror and admit, I've stayed here too long. Not in a location, but in a mindset, in a routine, in a fear, in an identity that no longer fits the vision God is pulling out of you. You're not stuck because of the devil. You're stuck because you've made peace with a version of yourself that was only meant to be temporary. You are wearing yesterday's skin and calling it growth. The question today is simple. What are you willing to let die in order to live differently? Because comfort is the silent casket where greatness is buried. And if you don't force yourself to outgrow the old you, life will do it for you, and it won't be gentle. We often say we're waiting on God, but God has already deposited the blueprint of transformation within us. He never creates anything complete. He creates it with the capacity to evolve. A seed becomes a tree, a child becomes a leader, and a moment becomes a movement. So why are you the only part of creation that insists on staying the same? The eagle has to break its own beak when it grows old. The snake must shed its skin or die from suffocation. Even Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains alone. John 12:24. Transformation is not optional, it's survival. Some of you are choking on an outdated identity. You're still responding to life from a place of trauma, reacting through the lens of rejection, and defending insecurities that were never meant to follow you into your next season. You must force the break, force the exit, force the upgrade, because the old version of you, though it brought you this far, is now in the way. Let me tell you something dangerous. Comfort feels good, but it lies. It tells you that staying where you are is wise, safe, and responsible. But comfort is a slow, polite killer. It doesn't attack you with a knife. It rocks you to sleep in the middle of your calling. There is nothing more tragic than a man or woman with divine capacity, divine fire in their bones, who chooses to settle in a version of themselves that heaven never intended to keep alive. The moment you begin to negotiate with comfort, you enter a covenant with limitation. And what you don't confront, you eventually become. You see, we were not created for stagnation. You were born in motion. From the womb, your life began with resistance, kicking, pushing, crying. You entered this world fighting. So how did you become so passive, so risk-averse, so committed to routines that require no faith, no imagination, and no disruption? It is because we have become slaves to convenience, and what is convenient is rarely transformation. The problem is most people don't grow because growth demands pain. And pain, listen carefully, is the birthplace of revelation. No seed becomes a tree without pressure. No muscle gets stronger without resistance. No greatness ever emerges without discomfort. Yet you keep praying for growth without disruption. You want breakthrough, but won't let anything break. You want to fly, but you're clinging to the nest like it's your identity. But the nest wasn't built to keep you forever. It was built to prepare you for the air. And if you don't jump, the very comfort you enjoy will rot into confinement. The children of Israel cried out for freedom, but when Pharaoh finally let them go, what did they say in the wilderness? Let us go back. At least we had food in Egypt. They were free, but still craving the comfort of captivity. How many of us today are the same? You've outgrown the system, but you miss its predictability. You've matured beyond the relationship, but you miss its familiarity. You've been elevated in vision, but you're still stuck in the habits of the old you. And the danger is what's familiar will always fight what's necessary. Some of you are waiting for a sign to move forward, but the discomfort you're feeling is the sign. That frustration you're wrestling with, that invisible tension, that holy discontent that won't leave you alone? That's not the devil. It's divine agitation. God is disturbing your nest. He's making what used to work fall apart because you're not meant to live on manna from yesterday. And the longer you wait, the heavier that old self becomes. Eventually, you'll either carry the weight of your former self or you'll shed it and step into something that scares you in the best way possible. Don't you dare let your last achievement become your lifelong identity. That promotion wasn't your ceiling, it was your launching pad. That applause you received was not the finish line, it was the starting gun. You've got more in you. But here's the hard truth. You'll never touch it while cuddling with comfort. You must break the agreement. You must tear up the contract you signed with mediocrity. You must declare war on what once felt like peace but was really spiritual sedation. Because until you do, you will keep mistaking safety for strategy, and there is nothing strategic about hiding when you were designed to conquer. So here's my challenge. Take one step today that makes your flesh scream and your spirit leap. Call the mentor. Quit the dead thing. Start the discipline. Delete the excuse. Stop consulting your feelings and start moving by vision. Because comfort is cheap, but becoming who you were born to be will cost you everything small. And it's worth it. Let me tell you something that may disturb you. Survival is not success. Enduring pain doesn't mean you've mastered life. It only means you didn't die in the fire. But God didn't call you to merely survive the flames. He called you to rise from the ashes with power. And the danger is that some of you have built your identity around the struggle. You've made an idol out of endurance. You've settled for being a testimony of suffering when you were designed to be a symbol of victory. There's nothing noble about staying in the storm if you never learn to command the winds. You've convinced yourself that because you made it through betrayal, abuse, poverty, loneliness, or heartbreak, that somehow this means you've arrived. But surviving is the lowest form of living. And I say this with love. Many of you are wearing a survivor's crown when God was trying to give you a conqueror's mantle. You're still clapping for yourself for escaping Egypt, but you've made no plans for the promised land. Stop equating emotional bruises with spiritual promotion. Getting hurt isn't the graduation healing is. Crying isn't the sign of growth, clarity is. You may have crawled through the valley, but now you're sitting down in the dark and calling it home. The trauma is over, but you're still married to the mindset it gave you. You don't need a miracle. You need a new metric for what winning actually looks like. Let's be clear. God is not impressed with your pain tolerance. He's looking for your transformation. He's not asking if you survived the storm. He's asking, what did you become in the process? Did you rise stronger? Did you come out wiser? Did you forgive? Did you rebuild? Or did you just decorate your suffering and call it testimony? Some of you have been in survival mode for so long, you don't even know how to think like a person who's allowed to thrive. You hoard blessings out of fear they'll vanish. You self-sabotage good relationships because dysfunction feels safer. You hide your talents because you're afraid excellence will demand more than your pain ever did. You know how to cry, but you don't know how to dream anymore. And let me say this, trauma is not your identity. Pain is not your home. What happened to you does not get to define you unless you keep rehearsing it like it's a script. You didn't come through hell just to write books about fire. You came through to teach others how to build heaven in the ruins. I've met people who lost everything, homes, children, dignity, and still carry themselves with grace, vision, and power. And I've met others who lost a relationship and allowed bitterness to disfigure their soul for a lifetime. Pain is not the measure. Your response is. You are not valuable because of what you've survived. You are valuable because of the wisdom, power, and anointing that was waiting inside you before the pain even came. Pain didn't make you. It only exposed who you were designed to be all along. So I dare you, no, I command you to stop building your identity around the scar. Stop telling the story that glorifies the suffering more than the comeback. Rewrite the narrative. Stop asking people to feel sorry for what you endured and start demanding that life recognizes what you've become. Because you are not just a survivor, you are evidence. You are a force, and you're just getting started. You cannot step into your next dimension while still feeding the dysfunctions of your last one. What you continue to nourish will continue to grow, and some of you are starving your future because you're too busy feeding your fear, feeding your insecurity, feeding your addiction to approval, feeding the relationships that drain you but stroke your ego. You're pouring water on weeds and wondering why your fruit won't grow. Let me be clear. You cannot rise while you're still invested in what's pulling you down. What are you feeding in secret? Because the version of you that's trying to emerge is at war with the appetite you keep satisfying. You want clarity, but you're feeding confusion by surrounding yourself with voices that contradict your conviction. You want freedom, but you keep feeding the habits that got you bound. You want to be elevated, but you're still feeding conversations soaked in gossip, negativity, and doubt. Don't tell me you're ready for change if your diet, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, is still designed for the you that was content with staying the same. There was a man who had been lying beside a pool for 38 years, waiting to be healed, John 5. When Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be made whole?" He wasn't being insensitive. He was confronting a dangerous truth. Sometimes you can become so used to your condition that you start feeding it instead of fighting it. Some of you don't need another miracle. You need to stop feeding the excuses that have kept you paralyzed for years. Healing will demand you give up the attention, the pity, the story you've repeated so many times, it's become your identity. You can't be healed and still be hungry for sympathy. Let's get practical. Feeding isn't just about what you consume. It's about what you entertain, what you tolerate, what you justify, what you won't let go of because it comforts the version of you that refuses to grow. That music you listen to that numbs your soul, you're feeding the numbness. That endless scrolling, the envy it fuels, you're feeding comparison. That person who calls every time you try to level up and pulls you back into small talk and small thinking, you're feeding stagnation. You don't need to cut them off in bitterness. You need to stop feeding access to what can no longer grow with you. I once saw a man at a zoo feeding a wild animal through the cage. He was laughing, entertained. But then the keeper shouted, "Sir, stop feeding the lion. It's calm now. But if you feed it long enough, it will want more than your hand." That's exactly how compromise works. You feed it when it's small, controllable, even enjoyable. But eventually, it becomes a craving you can't contain. If you don't starve it now, it will consume you later. Don't miss this. Feeding the wrong thing doesn't just delay your growth, it develops a false version of you, one that is skilled in survival but bankrupt in substance, one that knows how to fake confidence in public but can't sit in silence without falling apart. That version was not authored by your creator, it was created by your appetite. And you can't fix a spiritual identity crisis by feeding a carnal craving. So here's your call today. Change your diet, starve the distractions, Withdraw your energy from anything that keeps you locked in cycles you were born to break. Begin to nourish the boldness you've been afraid of. Feed your discipline. Feed your character. Feed the whisper in your spirit that dares to imagine a different kind of life. Because the strongest version of you is not found in what you endure. It is revealed in what you consistently choose to feed. Stop waiting for your life to change while still handing out plates to your past. If it no longer builds you, if it no longer reflects who you're becoming, then starve it, let it die, and watch what comes alive in you instead. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must look at their reflection, not the one in the mirror, but the one in the soul, and ask, is this who I was created to remain? Because let me tell you the truth that religion will always say, transformation is not automatic, time does not mature you, struggles don't elevate you, even prayer on its own does not shift you. It is decisions, not time, that shape destiny. And the most dangerous place to live is where you stop confronting yourself. Some people have mastered the art of staying busy while staying unchanged. They've got routines, rituals, even respect, but they haven't grown in years. They're wearing the armor of old victories, rehearsing old testimonies, while rotting underneath from the refusal to face what's still broken. Let me ask you something raw. What are you refusing to confront in yourself? Because it's easier to pretend it's not there. See, real growth does not begin with motivation. It begins with brutal honesty. There are conversations you've never had with yourself. Because the moment you start talking truth, the lies you've made peace with start falling apart. But anything you're unwilling to confront, you have secretly chosen to protect, and you cannot outgrow a version of yourself that you keep defending. You cannot cast out what you keep calling just who I am. That temper, that jealousy, that laziness you've disguised as waiting on God, that procrastination you've romanticized as perfectionism, that fear you've baptized as wisdom, those things won't leave until you stop petting them like pets and start putting them on trial. You've got to bring your weaknesses to court and cross-examine them with truth. There's a moment in Scripture where God asks Adam a question that seems unnecessary. Where are you? Now, God is omniscient. He wasn't looking for geographical data. He was exposing a self-deception. Adam had shifted. He had changed internally, and now his position in the garden no longer aligned with his assignment. God wasn't asking for location, he was asking for alignment. And I'm asking you the same. Where are you really? Not your title, not your social media, not your public image. Where are you in your thoughts, your habits, your integrity, your discipline? Confronting yourself is not an act of condemnation. It's the birthplace of elevation. Some of you need to sit with your own thoughts long enough to let conviction do its work. We are quick to post quotes, but slow to confront patterns. We're loud in church, but silent in self-reflection. But you will never rise until you face what's been hiding behind your achievements. Let me tell you a truth that I learned from watching a sculptor in Italy. He said, the masterpiece is already inside the marble. I just remove what doesn't belong. That's how transformation works. God already sees the greater version of you. But you must be willing to chisel away the pride, the laziness, the blame, the cycles, the false humility, everything that's crowding your potential. And no one else can do that for you. You can have teachers, pastors, mentors, therapists, but if you won't confront yourself with honesty and the discipline to change, you keep bleeding in private while performing in public. This is your moment to make war with your own limitations, not with shame, but with truth. Because the higher version of you is not waiting in a prophecy, it's waiting in the mirror. So stand there, look long enough, and don't flinch, because what you refuse to face will continue to own you. Let me tell you something few are willing to admit. Your environment is either growing you or shrinking you. There is no neutral ground. Every room you enter, every voice you entertain, every atmosphere you tolerate is either pushing you toward transformation or pulling you back into comfort. And here's the trap. Sometimes the most dangerous place to be is not the battlefield, but the place where everything seems calm. Because spiritual sedation often wears the disguise of peace. But peace without progress is not peace. It's a passive prison. Some of you are not broken. You're simply boxed in. You're not confused. You're surrounded by ceilings that you've convinced yourself are skies. And as long as you keep breathing the stale air of limitation, your lungs will never expand enough to carry the weight of your future. You have to be bold enough to admit, this environment is too small for who I'm becoming. The eagle does not soar because it hates the nest. It soars because it outgrows the nest. It recognizes the moment when comfort becomes confinement. But humans, we tend to cling. We stay in circles we've outgrown, afraid of being alone. We stay on jobs that kill our spirit just to keep a paycheck. We stay in cities that bury our vision because starting over feels like defeat. But listen to me. It is not defeat to leave what can no longer hold your destiny. It is wisdom, it is obedience, it is war in the right direction. There was a young man I met who had a rare talent for design. He had vision, creativity, ideas that could shift industries, but he kept showing up to an environment that couldn't see him beyond who he was at age 15. His family still spoke to him like he was a child. His friends still laughed at the dreams he had, and every time he took a step forward, their words wrapped chains around his feet. One day I asked him, why do you keep shrinking to fit into spaces that can't hold you anymore? He said, because I don't want to lose them. I said, but you're losing you. Some of you are trying to carry people who refuse to walk. You're trying to convince those who are committed to misunderstanding you. And you're draining your anointing, trying to stay planted in places that no longer feed your growth. You don't owe loyalty to limitation. You owe obedience to vision. Even Jesus left certain towns. Even he said a prophet is without honor in his own home, not because he lacked power, but because the environment lacked honor. And what is not honored will eventually suffocate what is sacred. You cannot keep pouring your oil into vessels that are cracked, leaking, and ungrateful. That's not generosity. It's mismanagement. And heaven will not finance what you continue to mismanage. If the room you're in is comfortable but no longer challenging you, you must ask, has this place become a museum of who I was instead of a womb for who I'm becoming? Because when your atmosphere does not match your anointing, you begin to deteriorate on the inside while pretending to smile on the outside. That's why some of you feel the ache in your chest when you walk into certain places. It's not anxiety. It's the sound of your calling gasping for oxygen. So I'm telling you, move, relocate if you must, find new conversations, detach from what no longer brings life. Surround yourself with people who don't just clap for your history, but demand your destiny. Because the environment you choose will always decide the ceiling you hit. Don't stay where you're only tolerated. Step into the atmosphere that provokes the next version of you. Because greatness cannot grow where mediocrity feels safe. You will never walk into a future you're unwilling to commit to. And commitment, real commitment, is not a mood, it's a covenant. It's what you choose when your feelings no longer cooperate. Growth is not for the curious, it's for the committed. We live in a generation that confuses inspiration with transformation. Just because you were stirred emotionally doesn't mean you've moved spiritually. Some of you have notebooks full of notes, journals full of ideas, prayers filled with fire, but no execution. Because while you admired the concept of change, you never committed to the cost. Let me say this clearly. Nothing significant is ever birthed without the pain of commitment. Your next level doesn't respond to enthusiasm. It responds to consistency. What separates the transformed from the stuck is not talent, not even desire. It is the willingness to keep showing up when quitting feels justified, to keep believing when your legs are trembling from the weight of transition. In the Old Testament, Elisha was plowing the field when Elijah threw his mantle over him. And what did Elisha do? He burned his plow. That wasn't symbolic, it was prophetic. He didn't just accept the calling, he destroyed his way back. Some of you are trying to step into your next season while still keeping the door cracked to your old habits, your old identity, your old mindset. That's not commitment, that's hesitation in disguise. You can't conquer what you won't close. You can't build what you won't bleed for. You've got to burn the excuses. Burn the backup plans. Burn the emotional safety nets that give you an exit when pressure rises. Because if your faith has an escape route, your future will have no foundation. Commitment is not glamorous. It's gritty. It's 5 a.m. disciplines when your body says sleep. It's choosing truth over applause. It's forgiving people who will never say sorry. It's refusing to let your history dictate your identity. It's deleting contacts, cancel distractions, and sacrificing comfort to protect the fire in your belly that says, I was made for more than this. I knew a young woman who dreamed of becoming a surgeon. But every time the semester grew hard, every time the pressure mounted, she'd talk about changing her major. One day I asked her, when will you stop negotiating with the very thing you are born to master? She said, I'm just trying to be realistic. I said, no, you're being emotionally irresponsible. Because every time you renegotiate your calling to fit your comfort, you step further away from who you could be. Commitment says, this may break me, stretch me, cost me, but I'm not turning back. That's the language of transformation. Jesus didn't die for convenience. He died in commitment. He endured the cross, not because he felt like it, but because he refused to quit. And if Christ himself endured for glory, what makes us believe we can inherit without endurance? You will not outgrow the old version of you until you make a non-negotiable vow to grow, even when it hurts. Your breakthrough doesn't start when the atmosphere is perfect. It begins when your will becomes unshakable, when your yes to growth drowns out every no whispered by fear, fatigue, or failure. That is when heaven moves. That is when your old self starts to decay. That is when chains you didn't even know you were carrying begin to snap. So make the decision. Not tomorrow, now. Plant your feet and resolve. Shut the door to retreat. Get comfortable with hard days. Get familiar with silence. Let pain teach you instead of break you. And build, even when it's slow. Build. Even when they mock you, build. Even when you don't see the result, build. Because if you stay faithful to the work, heaven will stay faithful to the outcome. And that is how you outgrow the version of you that was never meant to stay. So now you've heard it. Truth that confronts, challenges, and calls you higher. This is not just another motivational talk to stir your emotions for a few hours. This is a divine interruption, a wake-up call to everything in you that has been sleeping under excuses, hiding behind fear, and shrinking inside old identities. You cannot stay where you were and arrive where you're destined to be. One must die for the other to live. The old version of you may have survived storms, learned lessons, fought silent battles, but it was never meant to lead your future. You've come too far to settle, and you've seen too much to pretend. The world doesn't need the stale repetition of who you were. It is groaning for the emergence of who you could become. You are not here by accident. You were chosen to carry a weight, to build something eternal, to walk in freedom, and to disturb the status quo. But that version of you, it doesn't rise by chance. It rises by choice. So today, let this be more than a moment. Let it be a marking. Burn the plows. Close the back doors. Stop dancing with delay and apologizing for your growth. Stand in front of the mirror of conviction and declare, I refuse to be who I was. I will not live on expired strength. I am rising. I am stretching. I am becoming. And when the journey gets long, remember this moment. When the nights get quiet and the voices of doubt start whispering, remember this truth. You are not walking alone. Heaven backs the bold. The angels gather where obedience meets action and grace. Oh yes, grace will meet you where your strength runs dry. So press forward, not in fear, but in faith, not with hesitation, but with holy defiance, because the world is yet to see the full expression of what God hid inside you. And now is the time to become it. Good luck on your journey. May strength find you, may wisdom guide you, and may courage carry you through every valley to your next mountaintop. Thank you for listening, and may you never be the same again.